So on October the 30th, Rachel Reeves, or rather Rachel Thieves as she is now affectionately being known as, will deliver the first Labour budget for 14 years. And apparently, they tell us, it's going to be tough, and particularly tough on the hardest of working people, employers, business owners, entrepreneurs, those that earn over £55,000 a year. It seems are going to get hit hardest in terms of either tax rises, tax threshold rises, or indeed the likes of inheritance tax and particularly capital gains tax. So it looks like those that work the hardest, those that employ people, are going to be punished effectively for their success, for their aspiration. But leaving that to a side for 1 second, let's take a look, shall we, quickly at what the government are dealing with in terms of the money that the government has come in every year by way of taxation, etc., and indeed what it spends, because I'm going to suggest that the budget on October the 30th will be one big fat con. Why? Well, first of all, on the basis that the Labour government, Labour politicians, for many, many months leading up to the general elections said that Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt, the Prime Minister and Chancellor of the Exchequer as they were out of order, outrageous for increasing taxes in the previous 3 or 4 years before they left office, and that they were responsible for the largest tax burden on Britain since the Second World War, which is true. But it looks like in just a few days' time, Rachel Reeves, backed of course by Keir Starmer and the rest of the Labour cabinet, are going to increase those taxes still further. But why? They say, of course, that there's a black hole of £22 billion, even though most people that know what they're talking about say that that either doesn't really exist, particularly as the Financial Times, of course, put in a Freedom of Information request of the government and said, well, can you break that down? Can you tell us what that £22 billion is all about in terms of how you arrive at that figure? And of course, the Treasury, Rachel Reeves' department, has blocked that, which is a bit odd, isn't it? Because if that £22 billion black hole existed, you would think that they want to shout it from the rooftops in terms of what constitutes that £22 billion. But also the fact that most of that, certainly half of it, let's say, if we're being conservative with a small c, half of that 22 billion has been derived from the fact that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer, etc., Angela Rayner et al., have previously decided, since becoming the government, that they are going to and have increased public sector wages by an inflation-busting amount, so particularly across train drivers, nurses and junior doctors. And of course what will come next as a consequence of that is civil servants, hold that thought, I'll come back to that, and teachers and so on. So inflation busting and therefore economy busting, because of course that is billions and billions of pounds that form that so-called black hole. But I wonder if that black hole, even if it did exist, really has to exist on the basis that my research shows that the government receives just over £1.1 trillion in income on an annual basis, made up of such things as income tax, £277 billion, national insurance contributions of about £180 billion, VAT of £170 billion, corporation tax £103 billion, council tax £45 billion, capital taxes £39 billion, business rates £27 billion, fuel duty £25 billion, and let's not forget that fuel duty also attracts VAT, so a tax on a tax. Not the Labour government's fault, not this government's fault, but something that goes back years and years and years. Tobacco and alcohol duties, they are responsible for an income to the government of £21 billion and so on. So that all adds up to what's estimated this year to be an income for the government of £1.1 trillion of our money. That's quite a lot, I think, and obviously that has increased significantly over the last few years. Just to explain as well that when it comes to income tax specifically, the top 1% of taxpayers pay 29% of all the income tax. The top 10% of all earners, income taxpayers, contribute 60% of all income tax revenue. So they're the people, that top 10%, of course, that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer are about to punish. are about to have a pop at on the basis that they apparently have the broadest shoulders. Well, it looks like to me they're already paying a disproportionately high amount. Okay, so that's income. Let's now look at expenditure. Because this, I think, is where the con comes in. The amount of money that the government spends, which obviously has increased and increased and increased, is huge. We spend, for instance, £180 billion a year on health. We spend £85 billion a year on education, £89 billion just on debt interest. That's all the money that's been borrowed over the years that has to be paid back. That's just the interest, not the capital. That's the interest, 89 billion. And 33 billion on defence and so on, which of course some of us would say perhaps is not enough. But then look at what we spend our money, and when I say our money, it is our money, it's taxpayers' money. There's no such thing as government money, of course, it's taxpayers' money. We spend, as a nation, £87 billion on welfare. Universal credit, that makes up total benefits to this country of £89 billion that are received by about 22 million people. Now, there's only 70 million people in the country. 22 million people get benefits totaling, by way of universal credit, £89 billion. Lots and lots of money, and again has increased significantly over the years. But let's get down to the really controversial stuff, shall we? And this is where the meat and gravy of this video really is, in terms of the stuff that we spend that I would advance is totally and utterly unnecessary. And not just unnecessary, but because we spend, what I'm about to outline to you, such exorbitant amounts on this stuff, it means, of course, that we have so-called black holes, but we also have a need for apparent borrowing, which again contributes obviously to that 89 billion that I've just referenced in terms of what we have to spend in repayments, just in interest every year. As a consequence, your taxes, if you earn over £55,000 a year, or you're going to sell shares or a business, or you're going to inherit something from parents, etc., you are about to be taxed more because of this stuff that I'm about to outline. Now, get ready, because this is going to make you spit feathers. We spend £5 billion a year on asylum. That's just on processing and housing and the care, if you like, of people that come here to seek asylum. And of course we know that the majority of those are not genuine asylum seekers at all. They are economic migrants that are just grifting off the British taxpayer. It's estimated that each asylum seeker to the UK costs the taxpayer £400,000 over their lifetime. So I'll say that again, each asylum seeker to the UK, because they don't tend to contribute much, costs the taxpayer £400,000 in housing, education, health and benefits and so on. And this will really get you go. Here's what the Home Office are currently offering asylum seekers. And when I say offering, this is a page from the Home Office website. I kid you not, this is live. You can look at it now. It is there. That actually says, this is what you'll get. So this is, in effect, an advert by the British government to anyone from Vietnam or Albania or India. So they're the top three nations that are seeking asylum in this country right now, particularly when it comes to small boat influx. Even though those countries are not at war, and even though, therefore, they are not fleeing any apparent persecution, again, I go back to the point that these are simply economic migrants. So this website, as you can see, says this is what you'll get. You get, effectively, free money, free housing, free healthcare, including free dentistry, which, by the way, the ordinary British taxpayer does not get. You don't get free dentistry as such in the NHS as such. And if your asylum-seeking wife is pregnant, we, or rather the government on your behalf, bung her an extra £300 in cash, almost as a pregnancy bonus for being pregnant and coming over here and claiming asylum. I suggest, actually, if we didn't offer those things, perhaps we might instantly and immediately solve our asylum problem. Anyway, it gets worse. Out-of-work migrants, so those migrants that have come here legally and illegally, that don't work, which is about 1.6 million of them, cost the taxpayer £8.5 billion every year. That's according to a report from the Centre for Migration Control. So not my numbers, I'm not making this stuff up. This has all been sourced by way of my research over the last day or so. So that's 1.7 actually million non-UK nationals are either out of work or simply not bothering to look for a job. And I guess why would you? If you can come over here and get a free house, free education for your kids, free healthcare and free money, well, maybe we shouldn't blame them. But that doesn't mean that we should allow it to continue. Foreign aid. That is a very, very controversial sum of money that the government, successive governments, have decided to give to the likes of China and India. India, by the way, had their own space program. Money has gone to China to help them explore the merits of democracy. I shit you not. We are giving money to China, a communist regime, so that they can apparently explore the merits of democracy. That total every year is £8 billion that we as British taxpayers give to other countries, effectively just because, really. Even though some of them actually have got higher GDPs, higher economic worth than we have. Climate aid. This is something that the new government, the Labour government, elected here on July the 5th. As I shoot this video, it's middle of October. They've already decided to give a total of £11 billion to other countries for what they call climate aid. So this is money that apparently these other countries, particularly African nations, are apparently now going to use. And I'm laughing because of course we know that this is going to make absolutely no difference whatsoever, and indeed most of this money will end up being spent no doubt on dictators' jets and wives' handbags and shoe collections. So this is climate aid that the government are giving to other countries to help them fight climate change. It's absolutely hilarious, isn't it? £11 billion. Oh, and Ed Miliband, the lunatic climate zealot that I've referenced a number of times in these videos, has decided that we are going to give, again, our money, £22 billion over the next 25 years for carbon capture, which is a technology that even the climate lunatic Dale Vince says probably won't work. Ed Miliband has ignored his mate's advice there and effectively is still going to spend £22 billion of our money over the next 25 years on climate capture technology that doesn't work. And I'm afraid I haven't finished. Civil servants. There are 519,000 civil servants in Britain. That's up 24% in number since just 2017. They cost us, wait for it, the wages for civil servants, most of whom seem to be working from home, and they certainly are not as productive as, let's say, their counterparts in the private sector. They cost us £16 billion a year. And then there's the other part of the public sector that bleeds us dry, of course, that I've already referenced, the likes of train drivers and so on, that have had inflation-busting pay rises of up to 22%. That's cost us £9 billion, and it will do every year. And of course it will climb. It will be more than that because Rachel Reeves is going to continue to just say yes to the unions whenever they ask for another 15%, 20%. They're just going to get it. And of course we've heard just this week that I think it's ASLEF, the tube driving union, even though they've just been awarded a big chunk of taxpayer cash, they're going to go on strike for even more. They're just taking the piss out of us, aren't they? So anyway, let's add that little lot up from where I started on the really controversial stuff: welfare, asylum, out-of-work migrants, foreign aid, climate aid, carbon capture and other such bullshit nonsense. That's a total of £234 billion. So that's nearly £250 billion out of a budget of 1.1 trillion. And that's without thinking about how we might be able to save money, for instance, by way of efficiency and cutting wastage within, for instance, the NHS, the Ministry of Defence and so on. So basically a quarter of the UK's total budget, so the amount of money that they have to spend on stuff, I think is either wasteful or indeed pointless, or at least could be trimmed by quite a lot. Don't you think? Let me know if you agree with me. Let me know in the comments. Or do you think 234 billion on those ridiculous and outrageous things like carbon capture, foreign aid, asylum and out of work migrants, you think that's money well spent. Well, look, I would suggest that if we cut that just in half, let's say, well, that's 5 black holes, isn't it? And I would suggest that that would mean that our taxes could go down. VAT could be reduced, corporation tax could be reduced, income tax thresholds could be increased. Maybe in the public sector, why don't we suggest, for instance, that nurses, police officers, even doctors, even though they're not exactly covering themselves in glory with regard to strike action. But anyway, those that are in the public sector that we would say are essential, why don't we raise their tax threshold, for instance, to £20,000? They don't pay any tax up to 20 grand. That would be an immediate pay rise. So we would have about 115 billion pounds, by my reckoning, to cut taxes, not just help people, ordinary people, in terms of a tax cut, but help businesses. And guess what? Those businesses then, as a consequence, would be better incentivised, they would want to expand, they would grow, and as a consequence, that would grow the economy. So when you're watching Rachel Reeves on October the 30th at the dispatch box in Parliament, remember this video, this last 10 minutes, and when she talks about hard times and tough choices and black holes and inheriting this, that and the other from the Conservatives, you will think back to this, I hope, and realise and remember that that is all absolute horse shit. When it comes to allocating budgets by way of government, it's a choice. This government and all previous governments or future governments have a choice. They have a choice to spend money on such things as asylum accommodation, giving free dentistry to people that have just come off a small boat at Calais. They have the choice to spend that £8 billion giving money, our money, to other countries so that they can spend it on vanity projects. So this politics, this budgeting doesn't seem very difficult to me, but I'm afraid what you're going to hear over the next few days, and indeed at the budget, is how very, very difficult it all is, and that's why your taxes have just gone up. But it's absolutely unnecessary, in my opinion. It is one big, fat Labour con, and I think I've just demonstrated how indeed that is the case. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below. And hey, look, if you like this stuff, these revelations, this straight talking, why don't you subscribe to this channel too? I'd be very, very grateful. Until next time, I'm Russell Quirk. This is Straight Talk.